Question number 1 is a pretty in-depth question. So we're going to take this as a short answer and then do the more in-depth answer for those that want to go deeper. If you don't want the long version, you can fast forward to question number 2. So question number 1, how do I reset a food forest? August for most of us is the time of year when we're looking at our food forest and we're going, wow, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of fruit, there's a lot of berries, there's a lot of productions, and there's a lot of weeds. There's a lot of things that I did not plant there. I don't even know what that is. There's so much to do. How do I tackle a food forest that is needing some maintenance, shall we say? August is a great time to reset. So if you want the short answer, here's the 3 steps for your short answer. First, cycle your nutrients. Second, cover the soil. And third, reshape and prune. So you're cycling nutrients, you're covering the soil, and then you're reshaping and you're pruning. So that is the short, condensed Reader's Digest version of that answer. And I've got my notebook here so we can kind of work through a little bit of a process. So if you want the longer answer of that, I want to take each of those 3, expand and expound on them a little bit so you can kind of navigate through this journey on your own. And yes, this is doable for you. Even if your food forest is massive. I was at a friend's house the other day, a previous client, and they have 5 agroforestry rows that are 170 feet long each. Now, yes, that is a lot, but you can do this. You can do it as an individual. You can do it as a family. But if you don't want to do that, then you can hire someone. I'll come and bring a team to your house and we'll reset your food forest for you, because I know sometimes it's easier to steward it once it's already been reset. But it is doable for you. So if you want to do this on your own, here's how we do it. So the first thing is cycling your nutrients. Now you can cycle nutrients in a lot of different ways. The goal in cycling is basically we're taking the things above the ground and we're putting them on or underground again. Taking the things that are above the ground, putting them on top of the soil or into the soil. And we want to repeat that cycling process as much as humanly possible. So you can do that through chop and drop, and that could be just laying them down on top of the soil. Maybe you bury them with wood chips, maybe you don't. Now, if you don't bury them, you're not going to get as much nitrogen, but you're going to still get the biomass. You're still going to get the minerals. You're still going to be sequestering a lot of that stuff. So it's okay. If you don't have time to bury it, don't worry about it. Just chop it, drop it, put it around the base of the fruit trees, and you're still going to be okay. You could also mow it. You could weed whack it. And honestly, mowing and weed whacking is a great way to cycle nutrients, especially if you've got 2 agroforestry rows. Mow in between them. Just run that zero-turn mower. It's the adult version of a go-kart. Put your headphones in and just mow, and consider it, lazy man's chop and drop. And it really does work. Weed whacking is the same way. Now, the downside is you're not always going to miss all of your plants that you love. But sometimes weed whacking and mowing is honestly the best way. You could hand weed it. You could literally dig them up by the roots and then decide, do I want to throw that down where it is and risk it re-rooting? Do I want to throw the weed buckets on the compost pile? Do I want to throw the weeds into the chickens? That's what I usually do. You could do a controlled burn. You could use your propane torch. Do a controlled burn in an area, have proper safety protocol in place. You could solarize it, roll out the clear 3M plastic, solarize it for 6 or 8 weeks, just walk away, come back, and it's been reset for you. You could do animal rotations, controlled. I don't want usually animals running free in the food forest. Now, ducks, okay, they do great in the middle of the food forest. They do great in the orchard. Chickens are going to make a mess. Cows are going to, trample a lot of stuff. They're going to eat your good stuff. Goats will eat everything. But you can control do it. Here's your 2 agroforestry rows. Set up your solar or your electric fencing in between and run those chicken tractors, run the livestock down those rows. It is very doable to use animals as a way to cycle nutrients. Now, the good thing about animals doing it is they are composting immediately. So the chickens they're composting machines. They're eating all those weeds. They're eating the greens. They're eating the bugs, and they're pooping out fertilizer for you. What a fantastic way to cycle those nutrients. So that's our longer version of how you cycle. Now, how do you cover the soil? Now, again, there's a lot of ways to do that second step and cover your soil. You could do that through chop and drop, literally cutting Mexican sunflower, the bamboo leaves, or even the younger bamboo canes, the pigeon peas, the honey locust, the black locust, the senna family, the beans. You can chop and drop till nobody's business, or like nobody's business, and that will cover your soil. Now, the weeds can come up through that, so that is a risk that you've got to be willing to take. You could also plant new plants or ground covers to cover the soil. So remember, if you don't cover the soil up, nature is going to. And almost always, nature introduces a succession of species plant, which we would consider a weed. So if you don't cover it up by chop and drop, you could do new plants as the succession of species. So if you're in zones 3 through 8, right now, I'd be planting clover, red clover, Durana clover, white clover, Dutch clover, yellow clover, crimson. Any of the clover family. That's a little bit of a cooler season. They like to stay moist. Get the clover in the ground. And that's a great cover crop or smother crop. If you're in zones 9 through 11, right now, your smother crop could be sunshine mimosa. It could be perennial peanut. It could be cow peas. So those are some of the ones that we would use right now as our smother crop. So if you are chop and dropping, great. Cover your soil. If you are planting new things or ground covers, great. Those are your options. Or you could always do it by bringing in other dead matter like wood chips, straw, grass clippings are great. If you've got a mower, whether it's a push mower or a rider that has a bagger on it, what a fantastic way to just cycle nutrients. That soil is going to love you for grass clippings, leaf clippings that have been chopped up or whatever, so they decompose faster. And then I guess the last way that you could cover that soil is by broadcasting a multi-species plot, like native grasses, native wildflowers. You don't have to have a perfect wood chipped area. Now, if it's your front yard or a side yard or you're in suburbia, you may not want the field look. But if it's in, permaculture zones late 2, 3, or 4, why not have native grasses and wildflowers around your fruit trees? I don't necessarily want them directly around the base where they're competing for nutrients, but having wildflowers and native grasses in my rows, letting grasses grow up to knee high or even taller is incredible for the native ecosystem. That's how you're gonna, get the dragonflies that are gonna control mosquitoes. You're creating biodiversity for praying mantises, for fireflies. That's giving habitat for nature to be nature. So again, the step of this is cycle the nutrients, cover your soil. A lot of ways to do both of those. And then the last step in that process, this is your moment to reshape and prune. Now, I realize most fruit trees want to be dormant when we're pruning, but there are some things that you can prune kind of year round. They're a very tough, very resilient plant. Mulberries are one of them, persimmon. Those are gonna be okay to go ahead and prune now. I'm not pruning avocados. I'm not pruning mangoes. I'm not pruning anything that has a lot of sap flowing in them. Peaches, pears, nectarines, plums, gonna wait until dormancy. But if you know you're gonna be busy, then I guess this is your second best time to do it, because a lot of things have a semi-dormancy in zones 9 through 11 this time of year. So a lot of you are probably seeing peach trees yellowing or turning orange right now. They're not sick, they're just going into a semi-dormancy. Along the lines of reshaping, don't just think reshaping the branches. Think about reshaping your edges. So you're reshaping the garden paths. You're creating a buffer zone. I like, creating a buffer zone, especially with that blowtorch and using that propane torch to create a burned gap between your grass and the lawn, or, your rows from the agroforestry rows of the food forest. It helps prevent that torpedo grass, centipede grass, Bermuda grass from going into your food forest. So creating that dead zone really it makes a huge, huge difference on the overall maintenance in general. And then I would say, as you're creating those lines again, fill in your gaps. Look at your food forest and go, okay, I've got a good top story. I've got maybe some ground cover. Where am I missing? Look for the gaps in your system, because remember, nature God is going to fill in the gaps. It's going to bring in weeds or another succession of species. So you might as well fill that gap with something else. If you've got a really good top story and a really good herbaceous layer, consider a berry bush, consider a chop and drop plant, consider a little bit of a taller medicinal plant like echinacea, so think of something that will fill in those gaps, because generally speaking, this was in a class that we did recently for Patreon, the greatest amount of life, abundance, and fruitfulness is on the edges between systems. We call it the ecotone. So not really in the forest and not really in the field, but that place right in between, that 10 to 20 feet between a field and a forest, that ecotone is where there's the most diversity of species, both plants, animals, birds, and feather friends. That's where the greatest life is. So look for those transitional spaces in your system, recreate edges, and fill in those gaps along the way. So again, when we reset our food forest, we're cycling our nutrients, we're covering our soil, and we're reshaping and we're pruning, and that is a great way to do a reset.